a bill that would propose to defund National Public Radio and also look for possible war powers resolution on Afghanistan as proposed by Representative Dennis Kucinich. Now here on C-SPAN Live to the House floor.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Coughlin.
Come and help us, Lord our God. Those wounded returning from war are not afraid to submit themselves to physicians. In this humility, they live patience and offer you alone the glory. By their being faithful to the course outlined for them, they learn that it takes many small steps to make full recovery. In the same light, O Lord, grant this nation patience. Give this representative government wise discernment and courageous action to excise whatever poisons the whole system while preserving each healthy member. As we pray today, we ask you, divine physician, to bless, sustain, and reward the Navy medical team that cares for members, staff, and guests here on Capitol Hill. With them, may we give full measure as we serve in your holy name. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts.
I ask the guests in the gallery to please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 one-minute requests on each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan officially declared March as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. He called upon our nation to provide understanding, encouragement, and opportunities to help persons with developmental disabilities lead productive and fulfilling lives. There are currently over 7 million Americans who experience developmental disabilities. Disabilities have no boundaries. They can cut across all lines of racial, ethnic, educational, social, and economic backgrounds and can occur in any family. As an individual with significant hearing disabilities and a grandfather of a child with special needs, I am very familiar with the hardships of overcoming obstacles of disabilities. My grandson Maxwell has Charge syndrome, and it deals with intense developmental and medical challenges every day of his life. He is a true inspiration to our family and our community. During Developmental Disability Awareness Month, I encourage us all to learn more about the people in our community who have developmental disabilities and to recognize that all of us have talents and abilities that we can offer to make this a better nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? Gentlelady from California. For what purpose does the gentlelady rise? Without objection. The gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the majority spending plan that would cost jobs and threaten our economic recovery. Republicans have held the majority for 11 weeks now, and we have yet to see a jobs plan. Instead of focusing on jobs, which is the #1 priority of Americans, the majority is pushing spending cuts that destroy thousands of jobs. Mr. Speaker, the majority is ignoring the warnings from economists that say the sharp cuts they propose would guarantee major job losses in the public and private sectors. The Economic Policy Institute shows that the majority's plan would destroy more than 800,000 jobs. Mark Zandi, John McCain's former economic advisor, puts the job loss figure at 700,000. No matter who is right, the number is far too high. Mr. Speaker, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't particularly like public employees, but we do need to ask, just who are these public employees? Just one example is the staff at the Tsunami Warning Center. Under the majority's plan, the National Weather Center, the agency that houses the Tsunami Center, that issued alerts after Friday's earthquake, and there was significant damage in California after the tsunami,
Gentlelady's time has expired.
would result in a cut by $126 million. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Where do we get the gasoline to power our cars and jet fuel to power airplanes? We all know that it comes from oil, and its price is dictated by supply and demand. President Obama realizes this. In fact, his advisors have considered opening up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in order to stabilize supply. But if we are willing to open up this emergency supply, then why are we not taking advantage of the natural reserves that we have throughout our nation? Following BP's careless accident in the Gulf, 6 deep-water drilling rigs left for foreign shores, some even to Egypt. Deep-water drilling will continue, but off foreign shores. America will continue to need oil, but it will increasingly come from foreign nations. Rather than reducing our dependence on foreign fossil fuels, the actions of this administration are increasing them. With instability in the Middle East, our gas prices naturally rise. Let's open our natural reserves off our shores and throughout our country. Let's create energy jobs here and stabilize the price of gasoline in the United States. I yield back.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Rhode Island rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor and recognize the rich history of the Italian-American community in the United States as we celebrate the Feast of St. Joseph, La Festa di San Giuseppe, on March 19th. St. Joseph was credited with preventing a famine in Sicily in the Middle Ages. The Feast of St. Joseph is celebrated widely among Italian-Americans, including my family, many others across my home state of Rhode Island. And it's an opportunity to recall the many contributions of Italian-Americans to our country and to honor the patron saint of the family. Here in the United States, we recognize the powerful impact of the Italian-American experience, which began 5 centuries ago with the explorations of Vespucci and Verrazzano. Italian-Americans represent some of this country's and indeed the world's foremost innovators in health and science, business and industry, politics and government, arts and culture. In celebrating the many milestones of the Italian-American heritage on this Feast of St. Joseph, we honor the lives, work and rich history of Italian-Americans throughout our nation. Buona Festa di San Giuseppe to everyone. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentleman from Michigan rise?
I rise to request a moment to address the House and revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor a young man named Wes Leonard in Michigan and the Fenville Blackhawks and the community that rallied around that family. Wes was a star basketball player who, after winning a basketball game, the final shot of the game on March 3, collapsed and passed away a short while later. That was an undefeated season for the Blackhawks, and they went on 3 days later to start their first playoff game. They had won 4 additional games, and I was struck at the visitation for his family by the rival teams that showed up in their letter jackets to come and honor and pay respects to Wes, his family, and the team that he led. This team played admirably throughout all of their final games. And on Monday, this run came to an end. But a true mark of character, as I said to these young players, is how they respond to adversity. Mr. Speaker, these young men truly are of character. Mr. Speaker, I ask that we rise today and honor Wes, the team, the fans that supported them, and that they accept condolences on my behalf on the behalf of so many others who have asked, as I've been wearing this ribbon, to pass those condolences along to the community, to his family. We thank Wes for his leadership and all that he has done for his community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purposes does the gentlelady from Hawaii rise? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I grew up in Fukushima, Japan, where earthquake preparedness is part of life, but nothing could have prepared any nation for the natural disasters that occurred on Friday. While my mother has successfully contacted our relatives in Japan, many families haven't been able to find or contact their loved ones. Thousands of victims are in shelters. Many are still missing. The death toll continues to rise. Tsunami is a Japanese word that the world understands. We have seen the 30-foot walls of water sweeping across farmlands, wiping out everything in its path. Gaman is a Japanese word that describes strength and endurance. Gaman will help the Japanese people through this tragedy, but they do not stand alone. People from all over the world have sent messages of support, and donations continue. In the midst of tragedy, common humanity transcends geopolitical boundaries. Hawaii's ties to Japan are deep. Hawaii's banks are donation drop-off points. The Hawaii Blood Bank is coordinating a national drive. Fukushima and Miyagi Kenjin-kai and the Honolulu Japanese Chamber of Commerce are among many helping. Minasan, domo arigatou gozaimasu. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Yes, unanimous consent. Speak to the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We in Louisiana had to suffer through the BP spill, which is bad enough. But look what the President has done to us since. First, he placed a moratorium on offshore drilling, killing thousands of Louisiana jobs. Then the President was held in contempt of court for not issuing permits, and now we have 2 token permits created when gas prices are headed to $4 a gallon. On top of that, we have a tax on coal, domestic oil, hydrofracking, which is necessary for natural gas production. Finally, Secretary Chu told us higher prices may be a good thing. Perhaps we're discovering President Obama's real agenda, and that is deliberately constraining fossil fuel production to make prices go higher so alternative energy sources, which aren't really cutting it in the marketplace, will appear more competitive. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Republicans have had control of this chamber for 11 weeks now, and yet there's still no plan to create jobs or spur our economic recovery. Instead of tackling unemployment, my Republican colleagues are again targeting vital programs designed to keep families in their homes. The Republicans are proposing to terminate the Home Affordable Modification Program, which provides critical mortgage modifications to deserving homeowners who are facing devastating foreclosures. To date, more than 600,000 homeowners have received a permanent mortgage modification, and tens of thousands of Americans are joining their ranks each month. The Republicans also want to eliminate the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, which works to stabilize areas hard hit by the housing crisis by helping states and cities purchase foreclosed homes and protect the value of our communities. My home state of New Jersey is slated to receive $11.5 million through this program. Mr. Speaker, this is funding that my constituents need to help redevelop our communities, create jobs, and grow our local economies. I urge my colleagues to stop blindly cutting programs and focus legislation to create jobs and bring the economy around.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands rise?
1 minute, otherwise I extend my remarks.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No more short-term continuing resolutions. All respected economists and the Deficit Commission have told us we should not make cuts in this fiscal year. Is no one listening? These short and longer CRs will make our recession worse and destroy jobs. At a time when the recovery is beginning to make small steps forward, these cuts will destroy the progress we have made. Yesterday, the Republican majority cut wildfire suppression by $200 million. Oklahoma, are you hearing this? Flood prevention again. Are you hearing that, New Jersey? Funding for police. Don't Americans deserve safe neighborhoods, programs that protect our food supply, good for salmonella and E. coli, but not for the American people. It isn't enough for Republicans to deny the science in greenhouse gases. H.R. 44 and 48 cut funding from EPA programs that keep our air clean and our water safe. Are we creating jobs? No. Are we making a dent in the deficit? No. But are we hurting families? Yes. Don't stop the recovery our people need. Listen to the experts. Extend the CR at 2010 levels. No more cuts this year. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Republicans' budget would endanger American lives while it destroys American jobs. It'll increase every American's likelihood of getting sick from unsafe meat and poultry, contaminated drinking water, and foreign food additives. Fewer police will make our streets less safe. The chances of curing cancer, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's disease are all seriously diminished. Most of the cuts target poor people, but hundreds of program cuts will also endanger all of our lives. We've thrown hundreds of programs into a dump truck the Republicans call H.R. 1, bound for the trash compactor. Let's reach in, though, and look at just one of those, meat inspection. The law requires a federal inspector to be present at all 6,000 slaughterhouses and packing plants across the country. But this Republican budget's 19% cut will require 8,600 such inspectors to be furloughed for 22 days, which means that packing plants like Hormel's may have to lay off thousands of people for that period of time. Why do this when federal inspectors stopped 9.5 million pounds of poisoned meat just last year, alone in 71 recalls? Let's derail this dump truck called H.R. 1. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we've all been here since January, dutifully collecting paychecks and no budget for the American public. It's creating uncertainties in the businesses and keeping job growth down. It's straining our national security forces and making difficult choices for our reserve commanders to plan ahead. It's putting political ideology above job creation and facts. My Republican friends have often told me what they thought last November's election meant and what the American people were saying. I'll tell you what they weren't saying. We want you to go to Washington and put party above what's good for America. We want you to play chicken with America's economic future. We want you to protect millionaire CEOs and then blame the middle class and make sure you cut programs to their children. We want you to hold countless hearings on issues that do nothing except divide America and won't create a single job. Oh, yeah, and we want you to point fingers at the other side and blame them even though you run the House. Here's what I think they might have been saying. Be leaders, compromise for the good of the country, and get America working again. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes does the gentleman from Michigan rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our homeowners need help right now, and I'm asking this Congress to provide homeowners with something they don't have when they're facing foreclosure. It's time. Time to find more income. Time to find another buyer to pay off the mortgage. And most importantly, time and leverage to negotiate with their lender and mortgage holder who typically keeps losing the paperwork until the homeowner runs out of time. So I'm asking this Congress to freeze all foreclosures for homeowners who deserve it, for homeowners who can afford to maintain their property, because that's the best way to stabilize our economy and to save family homes. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Maryland rise? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today. I'm really concerned about the continuing resolution that we passed yesterday with over $1 billion cuts to one of the most important federal agencies, NOAA. That's right, our weather and natural disaster folks. Some people think of NOAA, they think of an agency that only impacts the coastal states, so cuts to this agency wouldn't impact them or their families. But it's important to know that every time we get the day's weather, so we can prepare and make sure we're warm or dry, we use NOAA technology. Every time we get alerts or tornadoes, for tornadoes or earthquakes, it's NOAA's technology. And in the wake of the tsunami that devastated Japan, the House yesterday passed a measure that would hamper our own ability to detect tsunamis. Currently, 7 out of the 39 deep ocean assessment and reporting of tsunamis DART stations are non-operational due to experienced broken moorings and equipment failures. And the cuts that we made yesterday put us in jeopardy. That's right, in the Pacific Ocean, in the Atlantic, and in the Gulf. We're all in jeopardy because of those cuts yesterday. And NOAA won't have an opportunity to repair them and to restore them, degrading the quality of our warnings. Mr. Speaker, this is senseless, and it's time for the American people to speak up for this senseless policy, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York rise? Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to the majority's aggressive war on the middle class and those who aspire to be in the middle class. Today we're debating 2 bills that, if passed, will leave Americans with no federal support to save their homes, with no federal support and the worsening of the foreclosure crisis, which in effect is a body blow that will leave millions of Americans who are struggling to find jobs even more vulnerable to losing their homes. We are now in the 11th week of the 112th Congress, and the majority has yet to bring a single jobs bill to the floor for a vote. Instead, the majority has proposed a long-term continuing resolution that would eliminate 700,000 jobs, while at the same time protecting tax cuts for multimillionaires and billionaires, the so-called job creators. The question remains, what exactly is the majority proposing to incentivize and encourage job creation? Where are the jobs? Mr. Speaker, the American people are waiting for the majority to stop the recalcitrant assaults on the middle class and those who are aspiring to be in the middle class and work in a bipartisan way to do what we all were elected to do, which is to work for them, not against them. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I know we're not supposed to remind us of our history. I won't be long, but if you will recall, some 8 years prior to this present administration, day after day after day, our budget was simply imploded with millions, trillions of dollars going into the war in Iraq. So here we are. Someone wants to blame the American Recovery and Investment Act. Well, let me explain to you. We were in double-digit unemployment. Look where we are today, going up and not down in terms of job creation and going down in terms of unemployment. The economy was sick, and it is coming back. But what do our colleagues want to do? Pass CRs that every economist says is the wrong direction to go in 2011. It's like you started out with $150 during the household expenses that you have. You had that money to pay for the expenses of that month, and all of a sudden somebody came and said, you know what? I'm taking $75 away from you, so you don't have that money to pay your expenses, and guess what? You're in the hole. Why are you cutting budgets in 2011? Why are you cutting 16,000 law enforcement jobs? Why are you cutting 800,000 jobs? Why are you cutting 800 Border Patrol jobs? This is the wrong direction to go. We need a real budget. We need real leadership. Adults need to come to the table and work together. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in recognition of the 100th birthday of the city of Westminster, Colorado, one of Colorado's Front Range urban corridor's principal cities. Westminster is framed by the natural beauty of the nearby Rocky Mountains. Westminster's scenic and convenient setting is located between the economic hubs of Denver and Boulder, which has attracted many residents and businesses to the city. Settlers from the east first came to the area of Westminster in the 1870s. It used to be known as the village of Harris and was formally founded as the town of Westminster April 4th, 1911. Westminster is notable in the Front Range urban area for its long-term commitment to the preservation of open spaces. It's received numerous national awards and recognitions for sustainable development, technology integration in city government, and quality of life. the miles of trails provide public access for outdoor recreation activities that are so important to Colorado residents. I congratulate the people of Westminster on 100 years of progress and prosperity and look eagerly forward to what their future holds for this important, forward-looking Colorado city. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. We have now gone 11 weeks and still there hasn't been any action in committee or on this House floor on anything resembling a jobs plan from our friends here in the majority. In fact, we've seen just the opposite. Economists are estimating that the initial action here, just the initial action, is estimating 800,000 jobs will be lost under their first plan, and many more over the course of the rest of this issue. Hundreds of New York Head Start teachers will be fired, and many other teachers will be fired all across America, thousands more. Thousands of my constituents won't be able to find jobs because of cuts to the Workforce Investment Act that will close job centers throughout New York, and thousands of others, hundreds of thousands of others, closed in other states all across America. And jobs in the Hudson Valley's growing solar energy industry will be hurt by cuts to investments in renewable energy, just as it will be cut all across America. After 11 weeks, it's clear that the Republicans don't just have a no-jobs agenda, they have an anti-jobs agenda. And New Yorkers and millions of others across America will pay the price for their bad policies.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that it be made in order at any time to consider House Concurrent Resolution 28 in the House, if called up by the Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs or her designee, that the concurrent resolution be considered as read, that the previous question be considered as ordered on the concurrent resolution to the final adoption without intervening motion, except, number 1, 1 hour debate controlled by Representative Kucinich of Ohio or his designee, and number 2, 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and that Section 7 of the War Powers Resolution not apply to the concurrent resolution.
Without objection, so ordered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 170 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 18, House Resolution 170. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 839 to amend the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008 to terminate the authority of the Secretary of the Treasury to provide new assistance under the Home Affordable Modification Program while preserving assistance to homeowners who were already extended and offered to participate in the program, either on a trial or permanent basis. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Financial Services. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Financial Services now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in Part A of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2. At any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 861, to rescind the third round of funding for the Neighborhood Stabilization Program and to terminate the program. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Financial Services. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Financial Services now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, except that Amendment numbered 9 and Amendment 10 may be offered only en bloc. May be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman, my friend from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
House Resolution 170 provides for a structured rule designed and designated by the Rules Committee for consideration of H.R. 861 and H.R. 839. This rule allows the amendments submitted to the Rules Committee to be made in order as long as they were not subject to a point of order and were germane to the underlying text of H.R. 861 and H.R. 839. This rule provides for debate and amendment opportunities for members of the minority and the majority to change the legislative text of the underlying bill. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the 2 underlying bills. The first piece of legislation, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program Termination Act, was introduced by my friend from California, the gentleman Gary Miller, on March 1st, 2011, and went through committee markup in the Financial Services Committee last week on March the 9th. The second bill, H.R. 839, the Home Affordable Modification Program Termination Act, was introduced by my dear friend from North Carolina, the gentleman Mr. McHenry, on February 28th and marked up last week as well. Both of these bills went through regular order, which allowed members from both sides of the aisle the opportunity to offer amendments in the Financial Services Committee and in the Rules Committee yesterday. The chairman of the Rules Committee, David Dreyer, has once again provided members of this body a transparent and accountable structure under the rule that we are discussing today, allowing members from both sides of this body to offer amendments and both sides to join in a debate of the underlying legislation. Mr. Speaker, last fall, Republicans pledged to the American people that we would stop the wasteful spending and put Americans back to work. These two bills that we're discussing today continue to roll back the abuse of taxpayer funds, the diminishment of jobs, and the creation of a proper government responsibility with any balance in the housing sector. By the way, Mr. Speaker, we also said that we would make sure that we went through regular order and would allow members time to read the bills. That is what Republicans bring forth to the floor today as we debate these two important aspects that have gone through regular order through the Financial Services Committee. H.R. 861, the NSP Termination Act, terminates the Neighborhood Stability Program and rescinds $1 billion in unobligated fund that was authorized in the Dodd-Frank bill last year. Congress has appropriated approximately $7 billion in 3 rounds of funding for this program. Eligible users for the funds include emergency assistance to state and local governments to acquire, develop, redevelop, or demolished foreclosed homes. So this doesn't stop or assist folks in getting through foreclosures. It gives money to lenders to fix up the houses to sell while returning not 1 cent of the $7 billion back to the American taxpayer. The NSP has done little to resolve the root causes of the increase in foreclosures. In fact, the NSP continues to extend and further exacerbate the current housing downturn. This program represents a costly bailout for lenders, servicers, and real estate speculators who made risky bets on the housing markets, all at the expense of the American taxpayer and our debt. While putting billions of taxpayer dollars at risk, we should understand that this is a program, 2 programs, that must be halted. There should be an appropriate accountability and reporting, and this program lacks both. This is just another 2 examples as following up of what we did last week with 2 other examples of the Democrats' solution of throwing money at a problem rather than something that would work and be cost-effective. Taxpayers from all over this nation are struggling with their mortgage payments, keeping their jobs, and providing for their families, allowing for a stable economy, a future, and reining in government spending by eliminating wasteful government spending will provide for more transparency and government accountability across economic markets. That is why we are eliminating these 2 programs today on the floor of the House of Representatives. Let's be honest about this. Republicans are here to try and save jobs that are on the chopping block from what wasteful government spending has done for us the last 4 years of Democrat control. Today, Republicans are on the floor to stop wasteful Washington government spending, which says directly to the taxpayers, we don't want 40 cents out of every dollar that we spend to be put on a credit card, a future debt that our children and our future will be put at risk from by mortgaging our future. Republicans are not going to allow that. That is why we're on the floor of the House of Representatives. That is why we will encourage every member of this body, Republican or Democrat, to make tough decisions today about not just today, but about our future. The second bill under this rule today, H.R. 839, rescinds the Home Affordable Modification Program known as HAMP. This is another unnecessary and poorly managed housing program that wastes tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars. Terminating this program would prevent the use of $29 billion of TARP funds. $29 billion of TARP funds we do not think should be spent. HAMP was established in February of 2009 with the goal of assisting with loan modification up to 4 million homeowners. Over the life of this program, only 521,306 loans have been permanently modified, and the redefault rate for these loans is very high. So what we started with trying to help 4 million people, thus far we only have 521,000, but it comes at a high cost to the taxpayer. Only $840 million of the $29 billion earmarked for this purpose has been used. Only $800 million of the $29 billion. We need the money back, Mr. Speaker. We need the money back because this is another case in which the program actually made matters worse for many of the homeowners who were seeking to participate, and the government is pushing a program which harms these homeowners. The program creates a perverse incentive for borrowers to deliberately and willfully stop making their mortgage payments in the hope that they can get a government loan to reduce their payments. So, the program that the government has actually encourages people to quit making payments, which still add up, including the interest and what they owe. It harms their credit rating and adds a further, what I think is an unfair circumstance to where the government is pushing, we're here to help you, when in fact, not knowing the rules of the game and whether a homeowner will even be able to qualify, waiting months to then find out, whoops, sorry, you didn't qualify, now you need to continue doing what we're doing. A false hope, Mr. Speaker. The Washington Times, which is a great newspaper here in Washington, published an article on March the 1st of this year on this program that stated that in perhaps hundreds of thousands of cases, homeowners are far worse off after HAMP than they were before being talked into and getting involved with the program. Borrowers are typically not told all the potential consequences of falling behind on their mortgages. They're simply told there's a government plan out there to help you, when in fact they fall behind on their mortgages. Services have repeatedly lost documentation and provided false information to home borrowers who were in need of assistance and good discussion with them about how they pay their bills instead of trying to talk them into a government program. In some instances, even pushing individuals into default that could have continued making their payments. In a report from the Inspector General of TARP to Secretary of the Treasury Geithner on March the 25th, 2010, that is 1 year ago, he notes that, and I quote, several aspects of the HAMP design make it particularly vulnerable to redefaults. It is time to pull the plug. That is why Republicans are on the floor today to say straight up, we need to look at what is not working. We need to look at the $29 billion that has been spent on this program, and we need to be honest with ourselves, as has been noted in newspapers across the country. What the Democrats have done, this administration, this House has done, have been adversarial to helping people who needed assistance. And today we can save the taxpayers $28 billion that has not been spent from this program. Continued government intervention and questionable use of taxpayer dollars only prolongs our current economic crisis and ensures that the housing market will simply continue to struggle. The market needs to find its own footing, free of government intervention and manipulation by this government, so that we can get on with a full recovery. The deficit is expected to reach a record under President Obama, using his numbers, $1,650 billion this year, while our national debt is well over $14 trillion. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. and its citizens cannot afford to spend billions of taxpayers' dollars that will not be replayed, and that ends up in many instances harming the people it was intended to help. Job creation is the most effective foreclosure prevention tool. Job losses, rather than unsustained mortgage terms are now the driving force behind foreclosures and mortgage defaults. Eliminating these programs will save not only taxpayer dollars, but encourage more responsible government spending by the federal government. So, Mr. Speaker, no surprise to you, I encourage a yes vote on the rule and a yes vote on the underlying legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, here we are again at a time when Americans are calling for more jobs to improve the economy, and my Republican colleagues want to pass legislation that doesn't create a single job and will hurt the middle class by further destabilizing our housing markets. This week we take up 2 more bills to continue to weaken our housing markets and abandon families who are working hard, struggling to stay in their homes, showing that my friends on the other side of the aisle continue to put partisan politics ahead of creating jobs and growing the economy. Yesterday in Rules Committee, when we had several members there from both sides testifying, the question was asked, are we in a housing crisis? Everybody there agreed, and I think most of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and my side of the aisle agree as well, that we are in a housing crisis. So the answer is, what is and what should be the response? Now, this response is what we have. My colleague from Dallas said that the current program, HAMP, lacks accountability. Well, it seems like the logical answer to that would be to create accountability for the program, not to eliminate the program. We are talking about repeal without the replace. We are talking about ending rather than mending. If there is truly a housing crisis, as I believe members across both sides of the aisle agree there is, it calls for a public policy response. Rather than talking about what we shouldn't do, I think it would be more constructive to talk about what we should do. We are leaving nothing in the wake if this proposed repeal moves forward. At a time when our economy is finally beginning to show signs of a strong, sustained growth, we need to do everything we can to put people back to work and create jobs. And yet instead, here we have legislation after legislation that will increase burdens on already struggling middle-class families. Rather than improving and building upon, or even replacing, programs that keep families in their home, the Republicans have chosen to eliminate these 4 programs that keep families in their home with no plan to strengthen the housing market or help the families that would quite literally be left on the street as a result. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 839 will eliminate one of the last lifelines available to many homeowners. According to Treasury Secretary Geithner, ending the HAMP program would cause a huge amount of damage to a very fragile housing market and leave hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans without the chance to take advantage of a mortgage modification that would allow them to stay in a home that they can afford. Now, we could go into how we got into this mess in the first place, and we all know, Mr. Speaker, that there's plenty of blame to go around. Yes, people who got in over their heads with mortgages they couldn't afford deserve some of the blame. So does the broker that shouldn't have sold them on that mortgage. So does the bank that underwrote that mortgage. So does Wall Street for packaging those mortgages and creating derivative products. And yes, so does the government for being asleep at the regulatory switch. There's plenty of blame to go around. And when the bankers needed help, they came to the government and the government helped them. When the regulators needed help, they came to the government and we passed financial regulatory reform last year. Well, the people that are most affected, the people that literally risk being tossed out on the street, rely on these programs to help them. How in good conscience can this Congress even consider bailing out Wall Street and bankers and not helping mainstream America stay in their homes? Yes, there's plenty of blame to go around, and believe me, many of these people facing this situation, barely able to make their mortgage, they're not being rewarded for their bad decisions. They would much rather they spent half as much on a house and weren't underwater and suffering as they are today. But what we can do to help them is the least we can do as a country to acknowledge that, yes, personal responsibility and blame doesn't just fall on their shoulders. My Republican colleagues will argue that this is a failed government program and that this program hasn't helped the 3 to 4 million homeowners that were originally projected. What they fail to mention is that HAMP, A, has helped stabilize the housing market, and B, has helped over 500,000 families. Now, yes, that's not the 3 or 4 million, and yes, our side of the aisle will be very open to suggestions about improving this program, whether it's accountability of this program, the scale of this program, how it's delivered, whether it's replacing it with another program to help those who are barely able to make their mortgage payments. But what we're talking about today would eliminate the tool that has kept 500,000 American families in their homes, Mr. Speaker. There's no doubt that many folks on the other side of the aisle are also calling this program a waste of taxpayer money. According to the CBO, the average cost per assisted homeowner in HAMP is $13,000. Now, that is a small price and actually a sound investment. It's far smaller than the $60,000 that it's been estimated to cost Freddie, Fannie, and large banks to foreclose on a home. So $13,000 to prevent the banks from foreclosing on a home, keeping that family in a home, allowing them to go to work and make their payments and pay back what's due, or $60,000 to foreclose on that home and leave that family on the streets. Money for this program is well spent. If an individual shows they can't stay current on their programs, they're removed from HAMP at no cost to taxpayers. In fact, of the homeowners that have had their trial modifications canceled through the end of 2010, only 5.1% have been foreclosed on, and only 14.9% are in the foreclosure process. Mr. Speaker, the HAMP program keeps families in their homes. Mortgages that have been modified under HAMP have a sustainability rate of 85%. Yes, we can do better. Yes, we would love to bring this program or others to keep 3-4 million American families in their home and stabilize housing prices. But what the bill before us does is repeal one of the only tools we have to help keep American families in their homes. I understand the program hasn't reached the initial projections that the Obama administration put forward, but there's no question, talking to some of the families that this program has benefited, that it does work for them. With our help, the Treasury can continue to take steps to improve the effectiveness of this program and increase compliance from banks and borrowers. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 861 would rightly be titled the Illegal Trade Commercial Real Estate Act. The majority seeks to undermine the efforts of our nation's mayors, city councils, and real estate developers and ensure that areas which have suffered due to economic downturn remain safely in control of those who do damage to communities. This is a critical program to help reform our communities. The Neighborhood Stabilization Program, which I remind my colleagues was established and signed into law by President Bush, was designed to turn a crisis into an opportunity. In 2008, almost $4 billion was appropriated to help 307 state and local agencies acquire, rehabilitate, and sell abandoned and foreclosed property, exactly what is most needed now, not only to revitalize our blighted areas, but to help prevent the housing crisis and commercial real estate crisis from getting worse. I remind my colleagues that every dime of this program that's not spent by the sunset of the program will already, under statute, be returned to the Treasury. By creating a mechanism for communities to acquire, rehabilitate, and sell back to the private market abandoned and blighted properties, we give local governments a very powerful tool for economic growth and fighting crime and keeping our communities safe. In the midst of our ongoing liquidity crisis, where many developers are having a tough time finding financing for many of their prime projects, it's a matter of public safety and critical economic importance that we continue this vehicle by which blighted properties are returned to being productive economic engines, particularly in our nation's most troubled neighborhoods. I also want to point out that this program isn't limited to commercial property. In my district in Adams County, Colorado, which, like other areas of the country, was devastated by the wave of foreclosures, we've used this program to revitalize residential neighborhoods. The Neighborhood Stabilization Program allows local governments to build communities with home rehabilitation, down payment, and closing cost assistance for low and middle income families. By using these federal dollars to leverage local efforts, many struggling families have been able to find and keep a home, and a modest federal investment has been magnified several-fold by private investment, city investment, and county investment. Mr. Speaker, I think most people in this country agree, yes, there is a housing crisis, and yes, there is plenty of blame to go around. And yes, we need a public policy response. These programs aren't perfect. We hope to work in a bipartisan way with our colleagues across the aisle on improving these programs, coming up with new market-oriented programs to help end the crisis in real estate. But the answer is not to simply repeal one of the only instruments that we have to keep families in their home with only the vaguest of assurances that someday, somehow, Congress might think up a better plan. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the gentleman's comments about us being here today on the floor in a bipartisan way with a bill that went through regular order with an opportunity for any member that would choose that has any ideas that are germane to the issue and that fall within the rules to be included. You're going to see where there are a bunch of amendments today. Mr. Speaker, the conversation the gentleman and I were having, it should further extend, and that is the common sense that is related to why we are on the floor today. The discussion about whether we should make it better or simply repeal it. And I would quote from the IG of the TARP Fund in his report to Secretary Geithner, and I quote, "Although in the final analysis it is up to the policymakers in the administration and the Congress to determine whether it's worth spending tens of billions of taxpayer dollars on a program that is assumed at its outset to fail ultimately for 40% of the participants, several aspects of HAMP design make it particularly vulnerable to redefaults." I think the IG has said it best. When any objective person looked at what the Democrat Congress passed, they would see that it was have to question whether it was worth spending tens of billions of dollars on a program at the outset we should have known would fail for 40% of the participants. I think that's good reason to say, common sense should say, let's stop the plan, not continue. Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentlewoman, the chairman of the Financial Services Housing Committee, the gentlewoman from Illinois, Mrs. Biggert.
Gentlelady from Illinois is recognized for 4 minutes.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I do rise in support of House Resolution 170, the rule for consideration of H.R. 861, the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, NSP Termination Act, and H.R. 839, the Home Affordable Program, HEMP Termination Act. H.R. 861 would end NSP and rescind $1 billion taxpayer dollars that would otherwise be spent to continue this troubled program. In total, Congress has already spent $7 billion for NSP, and instead of stabilizing neighborhoods or helping people whose mortgages are underwater, the program allows lenders and servicers to offload their bad investments onto taxpayers and delay market recovery. Even more disturbing is that critics warn that NSP creates incentives for banks and other lenders to foreclose on troubled borrowers, worsening the crisis and kicking families out of their homes. This program is not about helping homeowners. They have already lost their house to foreclosure. They are not involved in this. This is for help for lenders and bankers to take the money and build more homes through the counties, through the states, through non-for-profits, and then to sell these homes and reap the benefits of the money. There is no place in this bill that tells where that money goes. It probably is in a slush fund. The GAO, the Inspector General for HUD, and other auditors have noted that the program is plagued with problems including lax reporting requirements and poor accountability. There is little evidence to suggest that the funds spent through NSP are producing cost-effective results. Finally, the program lacks any requirement that remaining NSP funds are returned to taxpayers when a sponsored property is sold. Instead, the money is treated like a fund somewhere, never to be returned. The other bill approved by our committee is H.R. 839. This bill would terminate HAMP, which has become the poster child for failed foreclosure mitigation programs. According to the CBO, this bill would save $1.4 billion over 10 years. Announced by the Obama administration in February of 2009, the HAMP program to date has spent $840 billion. I'll say that again. $840 million out of $30 billion in TARP funds that were set aside for the program. For this extraordinary investment, the administration predicted that up to 4 million homeowners would receive help. Instead, only 580,000 homeowners have received mortgage modifications. Sadly, a failure to meet expectations is the least of the program's troubles. Of those who were promised help, 740,000 homeowners have had their modifications canceled, In many cases, these homeowners were strung along on false hope, only to end up in worse financial straits than if they had never heard of HAMP. Mr. Speaker, I would like to share a statement from March 2nd subcommittee hearing, during which Neil Barsofsky, the Special Inspector General for the TARP program, or SIG-TARP, exposed the most, and he said that there have been countless published reports on hemp participated who wound up worse off having engaged in a false attempt. Failed trial modifications often leave borrowers with more principal outstanding on their loans. Thank you.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 more minute.
Thank you. Numerous oversight bodies, including the